Vice Chair Juan Anderson Burgos, representing Ward 6, Linda Bacon, representing Ward 5, Terry Murphy, representing Ward 2, and Libby Hernandez is not here tonight. We do have several other city councilors joining us this evening, including Gladys Lebron Martinez, representing Ward 1, Jimmy Leahy, at-large city councilor, and Joe McGivern, at-large city councilor. Oh, David Bartley is here, representing Ward 3. Okay, so the first item on the agenda, item number 1, is a joint public hearing of the Ordinance Committee and the Planning Board, which was started on 4/21/20, order that in an effort to enhance food access and security for our residents during these uncertain times, that we expedite a backyard chicken ordinance, as well as a review of the permitting process for community gardens to ensure that it facilitates easy access and use of such sites. I'll entertain a motion to take this up off the table.
So moved.
Motion, we take it off the table. However, this is not a public hearing.
No, it's not, but I think it gets posted to note that it was a public hearing and that it started on that date. I think that's the reason why it's posted that way. Otherwise, yes, you're correct. We closed the public hearing already.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure.
Yep. So the motion has been made and seconded to take up item number 1 for discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so moved. Okay, so at the last meeting, it seems like we were just talking about how to organize the different documents that we would need, and we got a recommendation from the planning board regarding the zoning aspect. So just to make it clear, we have 4 documents which I circulated to anybody who was interested in this issue. One is the recommendation from the planning board. The second one is a draft ordinance that is in near final form. I think we will have to talk about it a bit tonight. And then there's 2 Board of Health documents that go hand in hand with the draft ordinance. And one we were just calling the Board of Health regulations, and then the other is the Board of Health application. And I do think that they're also in near final form. I think given that the planning board has wrapped up their end of it all and has sent us their recommendation, it makes sense to start there. So just give me a second and let's see. Here it is. So I'm reading into the record the recommendation from the planning board on backyard chickens. Dear Councilor LISI, please be advised that at its September 22nd, 2020 meeting, the Holyoke Planning Board discussed the above referenced zone text change request. After consideration of all information and testimony presented during the public hearing, the board voted 4-0 to recommend the Ordinance Committee of the City Council that the following zoning text change be approved. Amendments included adding to Section 2 definitions, hen and coop, and amending Section 4.4.2 permitted uses as found in the attached document in green. If you have any questions regarding this decision, please feel free to contact us. And what we see in the amendment is the definitions changes that were recommended, as well as the changes to Section 4.4 for accessory uses and structures. And then you see the chart here. And so what they're recommending, if you go down to where it's highlighted, is that 7 or more chickens is restricted to RA only, that's residential agricultural. But then a coop and pen/run for keeping up to 6 hens, specifically hens, it looks like they've included all of the different residential zones. So RA1, so in addition to RA, residential agricultural, they have R1, R1A, R2, RM20, RM40, RM60, RO, and DR. So maybe we should focus on having a discussion about this to begin with. Okay. Any members of the committee want to comment on it? I guess I could start. I know that when we were talking at the last meeting about the ability for apartment dwellers to have hens on the property. There would be an opportunity for conflict. It was a very large complex with limited rear yardage. And so there was a discussion of potentially limiting the allowed zones to not include anything more than the RM20. So excluding from that recommendation, then we would be cutting RM40 and RM60.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilor Graney, is that you?
Yeah, I just want to let you know that I just entered the meeting. I got in late. Thank you for your patience.
Great, thanks for joining us. Anyone else? I know Councilor Murphy, I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but I know you were one of the people that had raised those concerns. So I just wanted to see what you thought about perhaps eliminating the RM40 and 60 zones.
As I mentioned, I do have concerns. I mean, I have a few other concerns, but in terms of that, I mean, I have a concern in terms of fairness from one renter to another. And I know from what we're talking, it's first come, first serve, and they would get it and the others would not. And depending on the circumstance, I would certainly have concern about that. I would also have some issue there with someone being able to do it in a backyard that might be a yard that the other renters also use as a play area. Not that there are that many now that have yards that are play areas, but I know there are some. So what happens to those kids or those families with kids that might want to be using that as a play area, and now it's a chicken coop? So that's one thing. I also would wonder why we would have RA in the amendment, since RA is already covered for 7 or more. You would think they're all set, so I would think they would be eliminated from. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't know why RA would be in the coop and run for 6, since they can have more than 7.
Because the ordinance that we drafted is for up to 6 with a coop and run. So you could, if you had 7 or more and were in the RA only zone, it seems like you don't have to actually coop and pen them if you have that much property.
So it makes no sense then to have to coop and pen them with 6 when you don't have to coop and pen them if you have more than 6. That's what I'm saying. I mean, it seems like we are, by that, I would take it that we are creating an additional restriction on RA rather than creating an allowance in RA.
Let's see.
I mean, that's the way I interpreted it.
Let me just pull that up one more time. Coop and run for keeping up to 6 hens. So yeah, I think that right now you can have 7 or more in RA, but it doesn't allow you to have less than 7 the way that this is written. That's how I'm reading it. Animals accessory to dwellings, including cattle, horses, sheep, hogs, goats, game birds, 7 or more chickens, or similar livestock shall be permitted accessory to a dwelling. And then it tells you where they would have to be. So I think that what, you know, I keep on losing it. Sorry, I'm going back and forth on the screen here. The RA only allows you to have 7 or more, and that's not I guess I see what you're saying, but I think it's differentiating. It's differentiating between the up to 6 and then if you had 7 or more.
But my point is, you got 7 or more and there's no restriction, and you're going to have 6 and there's restrictions in the same area. I mean, that doesn't make sense to me.
I wonder if Sean, you could weigh in here to help us understand the way that the 7 or more and the up to 6 would work.
And are you required to have 7 as it is?
I think. Go ahead.
I did not write the zoning regs, and before this ordinance came into effect, it was only allowed in the RA. So I think that this is sort of something that might need to be addressed or tightened up. I think it's an oversight between adapting these regulations with the new, or adapting this ordinance with the new language and the regulations. I think this was just an oversight that would have to be adjusted.
Okay, so then I'm going to call on Crystal then to see if we did not delineate RA in the up to 6 hens, and if we actually struck out the 7 or more from the top, does that create the agreement that we're looking for, so that there's no restrictions in the RA on having a particular number of chickens or having a particular enclosure? Does that solve that problem there?
It looks like it, honestly, I think it's something we would need to clarify with the planning department and figure out what their intentions were, because it looks like they're covering RA for any amount of chickens, because you can have up to 6 in RA and you can have 7 or more. And then you can have up to 6 in obviously all of those other residential districts. I'm not positive what it was they were trying to do here. If that's an oversight, as you know, we mentioned, maybe it should only say.
I don't think it's an oversight. I think what they're trying to say is that when you hit 7, when you hit the 7 threshold, you could only be in RA. I think that we need to, in order to create harmony between these two pieces, it's striking the 7 or more and just having chickens as a animal accessory, and then in the following line striking the RA, because then you wouldn't have to have, it would become redundant.
Well, but I think they want to make sure that you're able to have up to, so right now it says a 7 or more, and that's included in your cattle, livestock, et cetera, in RA. But I think they want to make sure that you're also able to have, under that in RA, which it seems redundant, but, clarity is always better.
Right. And I guess I just want to make myself clear one more time. So I think if we strike the 7 or more and just say chickens, there's no number. And then if we strike the RA from the 6 or more, then there's no added restriction, to Councilor Murphy's point.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Agreed.
So it's just the striking the quote 7 or more.
And just put chickens.
Yes.
Well, just put hens, I would suppose, because.
Right, because we don't have, we're not allowing for roosters anywhere. So that should be changed to hens. And then strike the RA from the 6 or more. Okay, I know Councilor Bacon has been patiently waiting to speak. So do you want to chime in, Councilor Bacon?
Yes, thank you. To Councilor Murphy's point, I just wanted to be sure that there won't be any additional restrictions to the RA zone, which in my opinion is the proper place for the chickens. And I just want to note, since we're in deliberation about what our vote will be relative to this zone change, that I reached out to our prior health director, because as some in the room may know, we've discussed this issue from time to time over the past 10 years. And our past health director, given the health concerns and the continued issues that we have in the city relative to health and litter and other issues that we have not yet addressed, was opposed to any expansion of having hens in residential areas, and reaffirmed in the latest review his continued position in this regard. And from my own perspective, we appear to still be in the middle of the pandemic with increasing cases of COVID. And I don't think this is the time to add other potential illnesses into the mix. We've had some evidence of the possibility of that presented to us in the public hearings. And I really think we have not seen people having food shortages, and we're going into the winter season now. So there will be really no opportunity to expand gardens and that sort of thing at this point. And I really think the timing of this is not good in the context that we're in. But if it is the will of the committee and the full council to move forward with this, then I think we really need to limit it to single family homes so we don't have the competition that Councilor Murphy has been speaking to, and we don't have the conflicts that might arise. And I think it is equally important that neighbors have the full ability to weigh in on how they will be affected by somebody seeking to have this expanded use should it pass the council. I mean, we have to go through neighborhoods to get things like speed humps and various other changes, most recently for permit parking. We have to get approval and agreement in the neighborhood. And I think at the very least, an abutter should have a say as to what's going to be happening within 10 feet of their home. So that is my perspective on this. And I think it should be a formal public hearing process with the same conditions and requirements that we bring to any other special permit. Thank you.
Thank you. I have not received anything from the former Board of Health Director, and I think that, you know, we really heard from our Board of Health Director who has raised concerns, but has also raised ways that those concerns can and should be mitigated through this process. I do want to also state that whatever we sort of pass here via ordinance and understand to be the Board of Health underlying documents, the regulations and the application, they do have to be approved by our Board of Health, like the full committee with the Board of Health Commissioners. So there are opportunities for, I guess, additional sanitary or health concerns to be written into the regulations end of it all. Okay, so.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilor Greening.
Yeah, just a question through the chair. Is there anything in the proposed ordinance that would limit somebody from having these hens and using it for commercial purposes for selling eggs?
I think that's governed by the state sanitary code, and I don't see Sean at the moment, but I know that we do have something written into those ordinance related to gifting. So, and the gifting part is actually in the, if you will, it's in the Board of Health regulations that if you are going to gift, so give the eggs for free to neighbors or friends, they have to be maintained at a particular temperature. Sean was raising his hand and could probably speak more to that.
Yeah, so the way eggs that are raised by chickens are not regulated by the Board of Health for sale. The food code that Massachusetts has essentially exempts fresh eggs from restriction. So no, they would not be restricted unless we were to put a provision in here. What the only provision that we've listed in here as it pertains to the sale of hens and their eggs is you know, adherence to the state's guides about selling slaughtered hens, which you're not able to do without state licensing. And then the eggs, if you were to give them away or you were to sell them, they have to be maintained at a certain temperature. But there isn't any language in here that prohibits that at this time.
What about the sanitation of the handlers of the eggs?
There's nothing about the sanitation of the handlers of the eggs because, as I said, the state food code doesn't require boards of health to license the sellers of fresh eggs. So we didn't create additional restrictions around that.
That are you sure that the state doesn't require certain conditions?
If you have chickens and they lay eggs, you can sell those eggs without taking out a food permit at a farmer's market, for instance. That's why you see so many. So you don't see it as often in Holyoke, but in many communities, you'll see little farm stands in front of the house or a cooler at the end of the driveway that say eggs $2.99, and there's just like a maybe an honor box there where you can put $2 or $3 in there. It's because they're not regulated in the same way. They fall sort of under fresh produce, which is also not regulated. Uncut produce is not regulated by local boards of health. That's sort of through an initiative from the Department of Agriculture not to put additional restrictions on farmers.
Well,
So
generally those stands you speak of are in rural areas.
agreed.
Counselor Bacon, do you have your hand up still, or is this a new hand? Okay. All right. Counselor Greeny, are you all set?
I'm all set.
Okay. So does anyone want to discuss the allowed zones? I mean, I really do think that we can. I understand that there are concerns, especially I think to the point that Counselor Greeny is raising here, that Holyoke is an urban community, and this is the first time we're moving forward on allowing backyard chickens. And so I think I would even feel comfortable limiting it to residential that are not the larger multifamilies, like the RM20, 40, and 60. Because I do want to see this succeed. So if that is a point that needs to be negotiated, I think we can work on that at this point in time, and then add in additional zones as we see the success of this version of the ordinance. So I would be happy to cut out the multifamily dwellings at the highest, 20, 40, and 60 units.
Good, Madam Chair.
Yes.
So, I mean, I would be in agreement with that, and I will say I've gotten some comments from people that, and one of the things suggested, and I know eventually it's part of what you are looking to do in terms of community gardens, was the potential in the larger apartment neighborhoods to have community gardens where they would be in a position to have their own hen operation there. And I thought that made a lot of sense. It also would be more universal, I think, in terms of all people, because obviously if a landlord says you're not going to do it, but you are a tenant building, if we had a community garden, they would be able to go there. Whereas if and it would also be a situation where I would think if there are two people in that apartment building and they happen to want to both have a garden with eggs, with hens, then they would be in that position. So I think that does make some sense in terms of some of the restrictions. And again, I think, and I've said this before, I think the goal of this is admirable. I think we need to walk through this and make sure we are taking it one step at a time, and that we are resolving problems prior to going universal, and seeing that what we got a lot of other issues that came up that we didn't anticipate, if that were to be the case, then I think that would be both beneficial to neighborhoods and also beneficial to those that want to have a hen operation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilor Bacon.
Thank you. I just would like to make a further comment relative to something I understood from the last meeting, or maybe the meeting before that, and I may have misunderstood. So if I did, I'll withdraw my comment. But I thought I understood that our Board of Health is not enforcing our current chicken ordinance. We are considering changing it, but I would ask that all of our ordinances that are currently in effect should be complied with until such time does arise that it is changed. I don't think there should be a rush to expectation as to what the answer to this whole debate may be. So I hope that they will be complied with until such time as they're changed. Thank you.
Sure, thanks. Okay, so then I'd like to move on to the draft ordinance. Oh, Councilor McGivern.
I was anticipating the draft ordinance.
It was circulated.
Well, I have it. You gave it to me. I just had a suggestion on the butters definition.
Okay, can you hold it? Because I want to capture the amendments that we discussed, and then we're going to move to the ordinance for discussion. Does that work for you? Okay, so the two amendments that I have for the planning board recommendation document, which would affect the zoning ordinances, is the double strike. So it's striking 7 or more and replacing chickens with hens, and then in the up to 6 hens, we're striking the RA zone. So I'd like to entertain a motion to make that amendment.
So moved.
Motion has been made. Is there a second? I'll second it. Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So
No,
moved. So 3-1. And then on the second amendment that we strike the RM20, RM40, and RM60 units. Is there,
Could we just ask one more question? So RO and DR, downtown residential.
mhm.
Downtown residential, I'm assuming means like High Street, Main Street, those kind of things. Am I right?
Downtown residential is pretty large. I think it extends into Ward 4. So it would be up to High Street and into the tree streets. Gladys, do you want to speak more?
Yeah, so I'm somewhat confused in the dwelling decision of, for example, if somebody has a duplex and the owner lives in it and wants to have a chicken coop, that person cannot have it because it's more than one apartment? Is that not considered?
It would only be one coop allowed on the property. So if there were 2 tenants, they could either share the coop up to 6 hens, or they could have one person have it or the other, but not both. Having 2.
Six hands per, six hands per household, or chicken per household, or 6 in total for
6 hens for the property.
Okay, thank you.
Up to 6 hens for the property.
Okay.
Counselor LISI.
I have a zoning map in front of me at the moment, but I do, Gladys and Terry, since you guys are Ward 2 and you abut Ward 4, does it start on Maple or does it start on High?
What was the question? I lost that.
The
What happened? What was the
Ward
question?
4 boundaries?
Where are the boundaries for 4?
Yeah, does it start on High Street or does it start on Maple Street?
Well, for 4 is up by Walnut Street and kind of swerving in there. 4 doesn't have High Street.
Okay. So then it
no.
would be the downtown residential. I believe it starts at. I could get this confirmed for the meeting and circulate a map, but I believe it starts at. It might start at Maple, but it's either Maple or High, and then it goes up into.
Not 4.
No, downtown residential zone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I don't have that.
Yeah.
But I would think.
Go ahead.
I'll defer to Councilor Bacon.
First Amendment, we're doing a lot on the fly verbally here. And I just want to be sure that nothing is changing and becoming more restrictive in the RA zone. So I would like to make sure that our attorney reviews that and assures us that whatever amendments are made to the language, it is not restricting that any further. There's just been a lot of back and forth discussion on it. So I want to be sure of that. Thank you.
Yep.
From legal. Thanks.
So do you want legal to comment on that now with a suspension, or do you want to just have her clarify that at the next meeting?
Yes, at the next meeting, please.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so then on the amendment that's been made and seconded to cut out the multifamily residential units at 20, 40, and 60 units. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Is that a 3-1, Councilor Murphy?
Yeah. I'm still DR and RO. I still have my questions on that. So.
Okay, so we can get some guidance from the planning department and understanding the planning map a little bit better as to where these are.
Councilor LISI,
Yes?
forgive my ignorance on this one, but what is the largest unit after that last amendment that would be able to have hens at this point?
It's R2.
I think
Is that-
DR.
2-family homes, is that what the limitation is?
Yep.
It's sort of, yeah, similar to the question I asked. Yeah, thank you.
Yep. As far as I understand, it's 2 families right now. Okay. So then moving on to the draft ordinance document. Councilor McGivern, I know you wanted to raise a point here. I'll defer to you whether you want to jump into it or if you'd rather me go do an overview.
Whichever way you want to do it. They have 2 points, but just back on the zoning, DR includes multifamily residential, buildings.
That's what I thought.
If it's
But
in
up
the,
to how many? Up to how many units?
well, there are some units that have 20 or more. I'm sorry, 4 or 5 story buildings that could have the Holyoke House itself. And DR includes everything, single family, R2. It's all whatever is in the DR zone becomes DR, but it mimics RM20, RM40, RM60.
Sure. Then if there's going to be multis that are larger than 4 or 6 units in DR, which I may have been assuming correctly here, but then I would be happy to cut the DR from that also, but I would want to hear from planning or look at that use.
If you cut DR, you have to have a notation that the single family homes in DR are okay and the 2-family homes in DR are okay.
Okay, so that needs to be further delineated.
I'll defer that to legal too.
All right, so I'm gonna create a list of things to go over with legal following the meeting, so we don't have to keep on going over to Crystal. But Crystal, I am going to begin reading the draft ordinance. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but I'll go through the sections, and if there's questions, they may be coming to you. So I'm just giving you a heads up at this point. So the revised hen ordinance would be replacing section 1412, which would be replaced in its entirety. And where previously there was a prohibition, and then it laid out all of the sort of ways that would be enforced and the violations. In its place, we're talking about wild animals, livestock animals, and in general, we're talking about the way that it's prohibited, which is similar to what we had in the ordinance previously. And then it says, no person shall keep any livestock animals on their property except as otherwise allowed by the Holyoke zoning ordinance or state law. And then it talks about what happens if there's a violation. So the zoning ordinance was what we just referenced with the planning board recommendation. And then we get into hen specifically. So number 2.
Can I ask a question? On D? So if I'm reading that correctly, even though as planned, it would be the Board of Health that is giving the permit, it would be the building commissioner who would handle complaints?
The building commissioner handles complaints on the property setbacks and where the coop is located, but the Board of Health can enforce on the location of the coop, the condition of the coop, and the condition of the animals.
So, so the building commissioner is going to determine that it's the coop is 4 feet from the property line? Is that what we're saying? Or that it's not properly constructed? Because I thought those were under the health department, but so I was a little confused when I saw the building commissioner there. I know in terms of zoning, building commissioner is involved in that, but because of the specifics of what we're looking at here that are going to the board. It would be going to the Board of Health as suggested. I just don't quite get the connection. And then how would a neighbor know that they got to go to the building commissioner if they have a complaint?
It doesn't, I don't think it really matters, but I can pass it to Sean because I think he understands
Okay.
the nuance here a lot better than I do.
Okay.
So, Councilor Murphy, in kind of in the same way, obviously, less volume that we do it today. The way that this would work is the building commissioner, zoning commissioner would essentially be determining if the coop is in the appropriate zone that's not regulated by the Board of Health. So if we set the zone here, and there was an issue about whether or not the coop belonged at that property, there was a dispute about whether or not it was the appropriate zone, that would go to the zoning commissioner, building commissioner.
Okay.
Yes, setbacks would also go there. And then in the regulations that we created, the Board of Health regulations, we also reference an expectation that the construction of coops and any ancillary structures that are attached to it, including electrical and plumbing, would also fall under the building department. So it's really those three areas: the zone, the setbacks, and construction as it pertains to permitting that's required by state law for construction. Those would be the zoning and building commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Bacon.
Thank you. So at a prior meeting, we had a discussion about any conflicts that arose and resolving those conflicts. And my position on this is that I want the vetting up front to be as strict as it is relative to any special permit. And when we have two different departments having accountability lines is when things tend to get messy. So what I'm wanting to understand is, should this pass and there is a conflict between neighbors, is that going to be something that's going to go back and forth between the building department and the Board of Health? Or on the other hand, will it be the Board of Health that will be on point? The main problem I'm having with this whole thing is that this whole book of business will be run by people who are not responsive to the voters as we on the city council are. And so it becomes an administrative question, and we hear oftentimes people getting sent from one department to another. And this structure to me just seems to lend itself to that sort of complication. And I'd like to see it be a straighter, cleaner line of accountability. I'd actually prefer to see the special permit coming through the council, and then the boards and the departments can do their regulatory piece. Thank you.
Sure. I guess I'll come in here, and then Sean, if you want to add anything. I don't think that there's anything different here in this ordinance than what we are doing elsewhere throughout the city in terms of, I guess, the lines of jurisdiction for enforcement. I think Sean made the point earlier that it's really clear that when there's a zoning issue, the building commissioner is the zoning enforcement officer, and when there are health code violations or sanitary issues, then you call the Board of Health. I also think that many of the departments in City Hall do work very well together, and I know that there are often calls that come in for health department issues that are targeted to the building department, and then they get routed over to the health department, and vice versa. That residents don't necessarily know what kind of violation it is, and our city department heads are the ones that really say, hey, that's a Board of Health issue, that's a building issue, that is this type of issue, and they're the one that do some of the sort of parsing out of who's dealing with it.
Right.
I don't know if
so
you want to add to that, Sean.
Right. So if I could, so if this should pass, there should be one point of communication. A person shouldn't have to go through a whole bunch of research to figure out who to ask the question to. There should be one place if they have an issue or a concern that they can go to, and wherever they call will address the matter or find out who to address it through, but not send the person here, there, and everywhere. That's my point. Thank you.
No, and I do think that for the most part we're asking the Board of Health to regulate the chickens, but the zoning enforcement officer is going to, in some ways, always supersede the regulations when it comes to zoning and bylaws. I mean, it's just the nature of the position.
I just to chime in here, I would say that while I'm not opposed to this being handled like a special permit, I don't have any issue with that. Another solution would be through the ordinance to create, you know, a hearing board that could encompass myself, the law department, and the zoning officer. Or you could create a specific panel of the appropriate officials, and that way nothing would get overlooked. But that's another way of handling it. We have a board that we hear dangerous animal hearings, and it involves myself, the animal control officer, and a member of the law department. So that's a interagency hearing board, and that's how we handle those. So that's just another possibility that could be created in the ordinance.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I see Councilor McGivern with a hand up. Do you want to chime in here, Councilor McGivern?
Thank you, Councilor LISI. Just a few things along the same lines of where this discussion has been. In the past, I've shared that concern about the issue of the authority being the Board of Health and not having a public hearing. So I make a suggestion that number one, the definition of a butter changes from 100 feet to 300 feet. Number two, whoever is the authority that's going to act on the special permit has to have a public hearing, and all of these abutters of 300 feet have to be notified.
Okay. I'm taking this into consideration. I do think that all the previous meetings have really tended to steer away from having a formal public hearing because it seems that in some ways it's at the end of the day, I feel like what I'm seeing is that we're having a lot of public hearings. For example, I'll just use the marijuana issue. We are asking a lot of departments to weigh in and give us information, and our city council is not actually using that information to the fullest extent when we're making decisions. And so I think what I see happening, the way that our ordinance is working effectively with this special permit process is we have done a lot of work to write up an ordinance. We say part of this is a special permit process. We're taking a lot of time to bring in the applicant, to hear the project, to understand what they're doing. And then at the end of the day, all we're saying, conditions, this is becoming a bit of a habit, is it's conditioned upon the applicant meeting any outstanding issues with the technical boards and reviews that are out there. And I don't really think that we're using the council's time well in that way. And so I think there's a way for meaningful public comment to be a part of the process without having a really time consuming and, in some ways expensive, and it creates an opportunity for more sort of, divisive and contested sort of situations out of what may be, really simple neighbor disputes. And I mean, I don't want to see this being, politicized when it really can just be, do you meet the letter of the law? If you see the application, it really says, like, are you going to meet the law in this way? Yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. And they make it really simple. And I think notification and an opportunity for meaningful input is there without the formality of a public hearing.
I appreciate that. So if I can just finish, the reason
before I turn away to take up some other hands, I'll allow you to speak again.
If I can just finish what I was saying. So the reason I asked for this is simple. I had originally asked that when I was told that the Board of Health would not have a public hearing, that the committee would address that. I appreciate your comments. I understand your comments. I'm not a big fan of all these special permits that come before the city council. But I'm not a fan of not allowing abutters to have their say before a permit is issued. That could do a lot in terms of not having to have enforcement issues down the road if abutters knew where a hen coop was going to be placed, knew what the buffers were, understood what the ordinance is saying, and were able to negotiate with their neighbors in terms of, is this going to happen in the yard next to my yard? Apparently the committee doesn't want to budge on that. This is a deal breaker for me. So that's why I said this at a prior meeting. We need to do something about table setting for enforcement. This committee and the people who have worked with this committee have done a lot of hard work in terms of trying to make this ordinance work. But if we don't talk about enforcement, if we don't talk about upfront transparency, I just feel we're going to have a ton of issues. So that's why I suggest changing the abutters to 300 feet and requiring a public hearing. I think it's just a common sense approach and something that is very controversial in the city. There are a lot of people out there who are still in opposition to this. I was just trying to compromise, but if there's no compromise, I just want to let you know up front, it is a deal breaker for me.
Okay, Councilor Murphy and then Councilor Bacon.
Yeah, I would, and I've agreed with Councilor McGivern on this. I do think, and regardless of the fact that we have a lot of special permits that we need to do, I do think it makes sense that we consider it, especially in the beginning. Maybe we find out after a while that, you know what, there is no controversy and we've got people buying in. But I think if we approve this without a special permit process, and I agree with Councilor McGivern, I think we should have as many of the neighbors that potentially could have concerns able to be there to express their comments during the public hearing. I just think we are creating a can of worms that we're going to deal with problems after the fact rather than dealing with trying to do this by getting public buy-in. So if I bought a house right now in anything but an RA, my assumption is that there's not going to be hens next door. That's what I bought the house with, and that's what so that we are changing that condition. Is it a major change? It very well may not be. And that's why I think if we did a special permit process, if we allow people to come in, they get a chance to hear what's being presented, they get a chance to offer their concerns, and then, and my view would be the city council, after getting information from the Board of Health, that would end up making a decision. And hopefully, the first one applying would have their neighbors saying, you know, I'm all in favor of it, and we can just say, okay, if you're following all these guidelines, here you're approving it. Now we've got one, then we get the next one, and we get the next one. Then maybe we get some to get rejected because there's neighbors concerned, but we find out after a while that you know, the concerns that were expressed by others are not having impact on the ones that have been implemented, and therefore we may find out that there's a better process. But I think in the beginning, I agree with Councilor McGivern and Councilor Bacon. You know, we need to get as much input as possible from the neighborhood so that when something is approved, it's approved with neighborhood buy-in. And again, I along with Councilor McGivern, that's one of my major issues about this, is that you know, we're trying to create a right for someone now that wasn't their right before, and it does change potentially what that person next door who bought their house without the hen ordinance in there. And I think that's just fair that everybody has an opportunity to have their say. And whether it's at Board of Health, which I would think they're going to do regulations, but I really think the city council should be the public hearing if that in fact ends up happening. Thank you.
Councilor Bacon, do you have your hand up for this point?
Yes, thank you. I won't repeat what Councilors McGivern and Councilors Murphy have well stated, but I do want to say that I think this is a perfect kind of issue to have a special permit for through the city council and to have a public hearing with notice of abutters. Because it is a significant change. This is where representative government should be transparent, and it should be through the voted people that are hearing the public hearing, as it affects directly the people living in the various neighborhoods throughout the city. So I am in support of this point. Thank you.
Sure. And then with all due respect, I do want to note that we have been in public hearing as the ordinance agenda states since, April on this item. We just closed the public hearing at the last meeting. And we really have only heard in public hearing positive comments. And I do think that this is the public hearing process. This is the public hearing process by which we would be vetting all the sorts of issues and contingencies, and we are doing that work right here and right now. Like I think if we draft this ordinance in the right way, then we actually circumvent any of the abutter issues that would come down the line. And I do think again that we have talked about a way for there being meaningful abutter input without creating a full-on public hearing for each individual parcel that would want to take on 6 chickens, 6 hens onto their property. Sean, I see that you have your hand up here.
Yeah, I would just ask that if we were to consider going to 300 feet for abutters, and if we were to consider having a public hearing, that go to council. It was mentioned earlier that we are in the middle of a pandemic, and the Board of Health is taking on new responsibilities every day, and having repeated back-to-back public hearings with abutters within 300 feet would drown us right now. It's just not something that we're prepared to take on at that scope, and so I just feel like the appropriate forum for that would be council and not the Board of Health.
Thank you. Crystal, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so I just want to point out that when they're doing notifications, these are coming out of the pockets of the people applying for these permits. And if you're talking 300 feet and in some of these zones, you could be looking at potentially people with multi-unit buildings, and you have to notify everybody in that building. It could get really costly for the applicants. We've had it happen in other situations where you happen to hit like a condo complex, and now you have to notify every owner of every condo. And so think about, certified mail, you're talking $6.75, almost $7, I think at this point, plus regular mail for every mailing that they have to send out. So it's something to consider when you start looking at that broad scope of distance.
Thank you for that. So there's no other hands on this point then, and I guess I'll continue reading the ordinance draft unless people want to, suggest amendments along the way. So then let's see, number 2, hens, definitions. We are talking about who the abutters are. I know that there's been several comments made about going beyond the 100 feet here. Hen shall mean female chicken. Hen house or coop is the enclosure, the enclosed structure for the hens, and the run is the enclosed outdoor space for the hens. There's an application process through the Board of Health presently. We are asking the abutters be notified, and that with that notification, there is an opportunity for them to weigh in with their comments to the Board of Health. Complete applications must be delivered to the Board of Health along with the fee of $20. The specifications are a maximum of 6 hens may be kept on the parcel. A hen house and run shall be required for the hens on any parcel. A hen house shall be at a minimum of 3 square feet per hen, and the run shall be size of a minimum of 10 square feet per hen. And then it gives the requirement of durable material and with transparency. Hen houses shall not interfere with any utility or other feature on the property that needs access, and shall be located in a well-drained area that does not just discharge onto a public way or neighbor's property. Then it talks about the way that the overall area of the coop and run shall not really interfere with any of the noise or odor, create any noise or odor issues. And that's the 7th point. What I don't see here, which I think that we did ask to have delineated explicitly, are, so this is 2C. We have not expressly prohibited roosters. I don't know if we need to, since we're talking only about hens and defining hens as female chickens. I don't know if, I'll just add this to my list for legal, since it seems like I'm generating a longer list here. So we have not expressly prohibited roosters, which is, I know, something that is in the intent of the ordinance, but I don't know if it's redundant or if it's something that we need to state. Also, the setback requirements for accessory structures are 5 feet from the side and 8 feet from the rear. And I don't see that listed in our ordinance or in the zoning ordinance explicitly. And I don't know, again, if that is redundant or if we do need to make that statement somewhere in the ordinance or the zoning ordinance related to the hen keeping. And then finally, I know that Sean was talking about 100 feet from any body of water. And I didn't see that in here or in the regulations. So I think I'm not looking at the screen at the moment, so give me a second to get back there. I'm looking at the document. Here we go. Councilor Bacon.
Thank you. The other thing that we had a discussion about in public hearing was the slaughter of chickens. And in some of the readings, and I didn't have a chance to get back to the readings today again, there was at least one ordinance where slaughter of the hens was prohibited. And from my perspective, in the current zoning with RA, it should be left as it is. It should not be restricted in any way. But if we are contemplating expanding to other zones, single family houses, neighbors within 10 feet of each other, and we're going to prohibit the roosters, I think we should also prohibit the slaughter in the yards also. My understanding is it was present in at least one other ordinance.
I will defer to Sean on the on-site slaughter. I think we make a reference to the Massachusetts CMR that talks about slaughter, and my New York accent coming out here.
Yes, I recall the discussion relative to the state, but then I also reviewed ordinances from another city where slaughter was prohibited. Thank you.
Yeah, so there was a couple of the sample ordinances that we reflected where on-site slaughter of kept hens was prohibited through the ordinance. That was not something that in public hearing there seemed to be much objection to for sustenance. There is a state prohibition for the sale of slaughtered hens unless you go through the Department of Agriculture and the USDA to have a sanctioned slaughter, so to speak. But you know, if I don't have any objection to making that restriction. There just wasn't any additional. There didn't seem to be a desire for it during the hearings.
So, so then is the amendment to include explicit prohibition of slaughter in the zones where the up to 6 chickens are being kept? Is that how I understand what you're saying, Sean?
I mean, I'm amenable to that. Yeah, it would be easier to put that in the ordinance specifically than put it into the to the regulations.
Yeah.
So if I can
and I think that the way that we amended the zoning, it wouldn't have any impact on the RA zones presently.
If I can just point out, there is a stipulation under Part D. So 2D, we actually reference the state regulation, and it says that regulations of 105 CMR 500 shall be followed, including on-site slaughter.
So we would take that out.
We would take the on-site slaughter out and say that slaughter is actually prohibited. But we would leave the other piece there. Councilor Murphy, I see your hand up, and then Councilor Bacon, let me know if you're in queue or if you're all set.
Yeah, just a couple of questions regarding setback from the sideline, the rear line, and the public way. I know the Chicopee ordinance, and I thought I read 5 feet here, but I don't see it anywhere else. But I know Chicopee is 15 feet from sideline, rear line, and public way. and 50 feet from any abutting dwelling. And I'm wondering, maybe I'm missing it, but I didn't see where we have any specifics in terms of how close the hen house can be to the next property line or to the abutting dwelling.
So I can speak a bit to that, but then maybe Crystal, you need to speak in. So I was asked a question previously. So the whole zoning accessory structure chart requires that accessory structures be 5 feet from the sideline, 8 feet from the rear line. So I was asking if it was redundant to make it explicit in our ordinance, or if, because all accessory structures are governed by those setbacks, if we needed to state them more, if it was redundant, or if there's a need to make it more explicit.
So I think the best course of action here, because as we know, our zoning always changes, so I'll leave it to the body, but we can explicitly put how much distance we want from the lot lines. So we could include setbacks. Honestly, it's just an oversight. We had a lot of notes going into these ordinances. So at this point, we're just trying to clean it up and figure out what we missed. We could explicitly put the setbacks in the ordinance as it's written, or we can refer to the accessory structure notation in our current zoning. So that way, as that changes, this would also change. So it's something to think about, that depending on what the setbacks for an accessory structure would be, could change down the road. So do we want specifics now for chicken coops, or are we okay leaving it at the same requirements as an accessory structure? And that'll depend on how we word it.
Right. So what I hear you saying is that perhaps we should make an explicit reference to the setbacks for accessory structures without actually naming the 5 and 8, because they may change over time.
Right. So it's depending on whether or not you want a specific for hen houses, or you want this to be treated as an accessory structure. So do we always want hen houses to be 5 or 8 feet away, or are we going to rely on the ever-changing zoning regulations?
Thank you. I saw Sean's hand, and then Terry's hand, and then Linda.
Yeah, so for me, just a quick one. We mentioned the 100 feet from any surface water source, which that was from a couple of the other source ordinances or regulations we had looked at, and that really has to do with runoff, and it's not part of the zone. So if we were to refer to the zone, I'd either like to include the 100 feet from any surface water source in the ordinance or as part of the regulation, but that's more of a sanitary, it's just about keeping waste from creating issues with open water sources.
Mm-hmm. Councilor Murphy, and then Councilor Bacon.
Yeah, I would like to recommend that we do or incorporate what Chickabee did in terms of a 15-foot setback from sideline and rear line and the public way, and 50 feet from any abutting dwelling. And I for some reason I had that we had 5 feet, and I don't see it anywhere in this ordinance, but somewhere in my reading of all this stuff again today, I know somewhere it said 5 feet on the side. But you know, I just think 5 feet, and you got chickens, and I'm 6 feet tall, so it's 1 foot less than me. In terms of being away from someone's property line, and that could be who knows what. So I would just recommend that if we are doing this, that we look at what Chickabee has done. And I also would suggest that their fee is $25, that our fee should also be $25. So those are 2 suggestions from the Chickabee ordinance that I would suggest.
I think that through the previous meetings and public hearing discussions with the planning board, it was actually the planning board that thought that, given the dimensions of a lot of the properties within the city, that the Chickabee regulations were actually very prohibitive, and that that's how we came up with the 5 and the 8 to mimic the accessory uses. That's how those numbers came to be, the 5 and the 8.
Yeah, I would still recommend that we do the check. I don't, especially in the R1 and in the R2, I don't see us being dramatically different than Chickabee. In terms of their property lines, and you go to Willimantic and Aldenville and Fairview. I mean, I think you're talking similar things. So.
Okay, and then Councilor Bacon.
Thank you. I support Councilor Murphy with that notion. And I would just note that as an accessory use, a thing like a shed or a garage or some sort of structure like that is of a totally different nature than having hens in the backyard, with the need to deal with the various food issues and waste issues that go along with that. Usually an accessory structure is just quiet, holding machines or materials or things like that that don't really affect the neighbor much. So in that case, a 5-foot or an 8-foot buffer is okay. But in a situation like this, it seems like a larger buffer would be indicated. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Just going back to the accessory use chart that was given to us from the planning department. So yes, garage, carport, tool shed, greenhouse, playhouse. These could be quiet things, but it does say shelter for animals commonly kept as pets. So dog houses could be 5 feet from the property line. Swimming pools where people are running, laughing, splashing. There's lots of garages. It does talk about the animal accessory to dwellings for the RA district specifically. It does talk about family daycare, and then ATM machines. So it's not necessarily all quiet, sedentary sort of uses.
Just mostly.
Yes. Sean, do you have your hand up, or is this from previously? Your hand's down. Okay. So the last thing that I want to say here is that I think we also talked about expressly prohibiting offal, so dead birds from being disposed of in the city trash. And I don't know if there's a neat way of saying that could get written into the ordinance specifically, but that would be another sort of thing that we need to check off and send over to legal.
I do believe that is in the solid waste ordinance. We could check that, but I do believe under disposal of animal corpses or animal waste is prohibited already. So that might be worth just making a note to the already written restriction.
Right, and I don't think we would need to put it in the ordinance again unless we're making the reference, making the reference to where that is presently in the ordinance. All right, back to the draft. And shall not be kept within the living area of a residential structure. So that means that they should not be kept indoors at all. The CMR 105 CMR 500 shall be followed. And that includes the on-site slaughter, which we are going to eliminate and simply move to an express prohibition of on-site slaughter. And then heaters within the hen houses will be prohibited. And then we specifically reference the Board of Health regulations for the keeping of hens. And then it talks about violations. So if anybody violates the way that the ordinance says that you should keep, feed, or shelter the animal, will be subject to either a $50, $100, or $300 violation if they happen sequentially, if things are not improved. And then the Board of Health and its agents. So I think this is really where we start to clarify like who's responsible for the enforcement of this ordinance. And it says it right here in terms of B, that the Board of Health or its agents determines that a disturbance or damage to the property or surrounding properties or public areas be egregious or severe, or there's a violation endangering the animals, that the hens will be removed immediately at the owner's expense. And then there talks about some sort of an appeal process that has the hearing authority composed of the director of the Board of Health, one disinterested party of the Board of Health, and one member of the law department, which is typically the solicitor. I think Sean has mentioned previously that this would be sort of replicating the process they have for dogs or other animals that have disputes or incidents surrounding them. And that's the whole thing. It's pretty cut and dry. I know that there are still some, I guess, issues of contention that need to be clarified and then, I guess, negotiated and hammered out. But the ordinance is straightforward and fairly simple. The zoning ordinance, I think, is also very simple. The Board of Health regulations somewhat emulate and give a few more specifics. So if you go into the Board of Health regulations document, that document very much sort of mimics the organization of, what did I do here? I pulled up the wrong one. It mimics the organization of the, here it is, of the ordinance, and then adds additional details, such as like the waste shall be either composted with carbonaceous materials such as hay, bedding, leaves, or stored in a sealed container until it can be removed from the property. Same thing with like the food shall be kept in a sealed and locked container. It just gives a little bit more of the specifics. So I see Councilor Murphy, you have your hand up here, and then Crystal, I think you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, just another question related to it. I don't see it in the ordinance, but I'm assuming we have agreed that there's no free ranging.
Oh yeah, it says very
within the
specifically
coop
that
and within the runner, right?
yeah,
So
run.
I think we need to, from an ordinance perspective, I think we would need to state that, because otherwise there's nothing saying that they can't send the hand out to run in their yard.
It does say in terms of, where is it? It's in the Board of Health regulations. I'm just looking through it to see where that is. Keeping of hens. Hen houses, hen feed, on-site slaughter.
It would be 15 under regulations. It says hen houses shall be confined to the subject property, and hens shall not be allowed to wander onto other properties, including city-owned land.
And I think that one became under 2, structures and setback, and then it's letter, sorry, I just lost it. G, no, F, sorry, F, 2F. Hen houses shall be confined to the subject property, and hens shall not be allowed to wander onto other properties, including city-owned land.
Well, just playing devil's advocate again, unfortunately. But so if I read that, it doesn't, we're setting up the structure so that they can't, but we haven't said that they can't. I mean, I don't see anything saying that the owner can't let them have that. You got an enclosed yard that they could let their hens run in the yard. I mean, again, I did some more reading and free ranging. That was one of the concerns from other cities that have allowed this, that they also allowed free ranging and didn't specifically restrict it. And then it ended up being a problem, because even though they had good fencing, the hens still were able to get either close to or into other properties. So if that's possible, I'd like to see us put that where we are making it explicit that the hens are to maintain in the coop or in the run and not allowed free range.
I think we could probably amend that to, 2F to say that the hen houses, the hen houses themselves. So you're talking about the hens. Sure, so no free ranging. So the hens must be in a similar way confined to the area enclosed by the coop and run.
Correct.
Councilor Anderson Burgos, I saw your hand.
Hi, thank you. Has anyone considered the impact on animal control and the kind of work that's going to be coming their way. And also considering that we have a tight budget, what's that going to look like on our budget? These are things that I don't feel that we've discussed, but I think we should start considering it because it might be up the road. So rather start that conversation now than to get blindsided by it later. So these are things that we should definitely be talking about.
Yeah, I do think that we have discussed this at length in the previous meetings. I think that we have talked about it both with the animal control officer. TJO has also participated in these meetings, as well as our Board of Health director have all talked about how there would likely be an impact, especially at first, because there'd be a spike in sort of new applications and new work to complete. But
Well, we real quick, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but we didn't renew the contract with TJL, did we? I thought we didn't.
we did.
We did? Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yep. The last meeting, I think I specifically spoke about how our ordinance is very conservative. So there's actually a lot of work for the Board of Health to do, because every hen house that is outside of the RA district is actually in violation of the city ordinances. So if we were allowing it in more zones, there would actually be fewer violations, which is not to say that we wouldn't see that spike in workload for the department in terms of processing the applications. But it seems like, it would sort of be, what do I want to say, a wash in some ways in terms of the amount of work that would be done. And again, we can always visit or revisit how much work is actually happening. Excuse me for a second. Hi, sorry. Okay, so Juan, do you have your hand up still, or is that you're all set? And then Crystal, how about you? Are you working to weigh in here?
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions so we can kind of sort out some more draft stuff. So we're looking at annual renewals of these permits, and there's been talk about possibly doing a special permit process versus just Board of Health hearings. And if we're doing annual permits, are we looking at a public hearing each year annually? So now you're looking at how many people have chickens, how many permits are going to come in an influx every year, and the constant notification of abutters? Or is this something administrative that we're going to do every year, assuming that you have good standing? So there's something else to think about with the violations, whether or not you've gone through a violation period. Are we going to insert something into the ordinance as far as if you've failed to keep hens accordingly for the year, are you now prohibited from keeping them for a year, for a lifetime, until a new owner, and sort of that process of how that works? Because if we're looking at the potential of quite a few properties that will end up with hens on them, it's going to be a lot of work every year, not just a one-time influx of people adding hens to their property.
Mm-hmm. And that's only if we do the special permit process.
Well, I mean, even for the Board of Health, if we're looking at an annual fee for an annual renewal of their permit, I guess I'm just looking for some guidance as to whether or not we want explicit language of how that annual process is going to work. Because potentially everybody that's out of compliance right now, within 365 days, they're all going to be in compliance. So there will be no more pre-existing non-conforming use if we're going to do an annual permitting process, because at some point, everyone's going to need to be into compliance. So I just am curious if we want language to be very explicit in our ordinance, or if we're going to simply have just an annual permitting process, and what sort of the thoughts of the body are on that.
Councilor LISI?
Sure, Councilor Bacon, and then I think Sean should also weigh in on this because it'll be his department that is processing this all. But go ahead, Councilor Bacon.
Thank you. So I would see this running in the way that our special permits run now, that when one is granted, if all the conditions of the special permit and the regulations are met and all fees, taxes, et cetera, are paid to the city, then that special permit would remain in force unless the person is seeking to make a substantial change to the special permit. And that typically we renew those without objection and without a public hearing. That would be my perspective. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll say that I'm completely opposed to making this a city council special permit. I think that it's just going in the wrong direction. I want to file 1 million orders to cut special permits from the city council's purview, because if anything, COVID has showed us how inefficient, how we're just not using our time well. We have so many technical review boards giving us information. We're not actually utilizing those information when we make our decisions. And all we're saying is to the applicants, whoever they are, just follow the rules that those other guys set. So why do we need to insert the city council into every single process in that way? I just think that there are other ways. Again, I understand there is value to meaningful public comment and participation, but I don't think it has to be a formal, full-on special permit by the city council every single time. I have Sean and then Councilor McGivern willing to speak.
So I guess to answer Crystal's question and kind of to dovetail off of this, when we have permits that we issue on an annual basis, we do not review every permit individually for renewal or non-renewal, sort of to what Councilor Bacon mentioned. If you have a permit and you submit all your renewal paperwork in a timely fashion, we would just renew your permit. The way that we handle it at the board is if there are mounting issues with a permit, we wouldn't wait until renewal time to revoke or suspend. If there were multiple issues in a short period of time, we would have a Board of Health hearing. The permit holder would be called to appear in front of the board remotely at this time. Typically, it's in person in non-COVID times. And then we would hash out whatever needed to be done at a board hearing or at a board meeting, which they're held monthly. And so that's sort of like, reviewing every permit for validity all at once. That wouldn't be the way we would handle it. We would just address things as they came up. If this were to go to council for a special permit hearing, I think we would have to relook at how this goes, because it would no longer be a Board of Health permit. If the Board of Health is not going to be the body that issues the permits or revokes the permits, our role in this would be a little bit different than it is now. And so we kind of have to start from scratch on the regulations.
Thanks. Councilor McGivern.
Thank you, Councilor Lacey. I think I agree with you 100% on special permits. We have far too many. They're hard to keep up with, and they do take a lot of our time. But I'll remind you, and I think we all know, the first special permit we took over was for used car lots. Councilor Lopez proposed that. The reason Councilor Lopez proposed that is because there was no enforcement of the used car lot special permit. And we had some hideous businesses operating in this city. We took over special permits not because we want to, not because we should be the authority that gives out the special permits, but we took them over because the Board of Health does no enforcement in these permits. The building department does little to enforce these permits, and the police department does no enforcement whatsoever. And that's why we took it over, because we want the transparency and we want a place for people who have issues with this type of activity to come to. So we listen to the complaints of neighbors, and when the special permit comes back up, we don't have to renew it. We don't have to, we don't have to go through a whole hearing process, but we don't have to renew it. And this has been going on for 20 years now. I agree with you, but until somebody starts enforcing the law, what are we supposed to do?
Thank you. Crystal, is that your hand up for speaking here, or was that from before?
No, just remaining, sorry.
Okay. So I'll make a list here to wrap up this conversation, and perhaps we could have some of these things in a draft form for the next meeting, and we can figure out where they're going. But let's see. We want to ensure that by changing the zoning ordinance in the ways that we did, talking about striking the 7 or more and changing chickens to hens, and then for the 6 or up to 6 district striking RA, that we are not creating more restrictions for the RA district. So that's number 1. Number 2, we want to know what number units are allowed in DR, or I guess the density of units that are allowed in DR and RO, and see if there is an ability to, if we are allowing it in DR and RO, for example, that we can, if there's a way to delineate the number of units, that would be the maximum structure to be allowed the permission to have the backyard hen ordinance. There was a point raised by Councilor Graney about whether or not fresh eggs for commercial sale needed to be regulated, and I think Sean clarified that they do not, according to the Massachusetts Food Code. There was a proposal to move the abutter notification from 100 to 300 feet. That comes with a significant cost. The permitting authority, I think that's still up in the air, whether it's going to be the Board of Health special permit with meaningful public input, or if it's going to be a full-blown special permit by the City Council with a public hearing. The last few things that we wanted to either more clearly delineate in the ordinance were roosters are expressly prohibited, setbacks. I know that Councilor Murphy is showing a preference for the Chicopee 15 and 50 feet as opposed to the accessory structures that's under debate right here, accessory structures at 5 and 8 feet. We need to expressly include 100 feet away from any surface water body. I'm going to expressly prohibit on-site slaughter. And then we need to make a reference to no offal in city trash.
Free ranging.
That was my next one.
Oh, okay.
Hens shall be limited to the enclosed coop and run. And there was a note that Crystal raised regarding violations and whether that would have an impact on future keeping. I think it's especially important because the permit, as we've been discussing it, I think the permit would run with the individual. And if there are renters, it may be that there's a property owner that has a problem tenant in terms of the way they're keeping chickens, but down the line there may be a new tenant that wants to keep chickens, and we should figure out a way to ensure that that doesn't weigh against a new tenant. Renewals are an issue that we need to clarify here. So I think that's it, unless there's other points that councilors want to raise for discussion. Okay, so then I'll entertain a motion that this be tabled and drafted into a legal form so that we could review another draft of the ordinance at the next meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So that's 4-0 for tabling. Okay, I think that's it for item number 1.
I'd like to make a motion to take up item number 2 off the table.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to take up item number 2. All in favor?
Aye.
And now I have to go back to my meeting agenda here. Here it is. Item number 2 is filed by Councilor Bartley, who is with us, that the City of Holyoke accept Old Bassett Road as a public way. The solicitor advised it is not an accepted street. The city engineer advised that the acceptance would generally be a plus for the city in terms of Chapter 90 funds. Finally, this is at the bequest of one of the street's residents. We did receive a communication from an interested party, and I believe I forwarded it to the full committee. And it was a resident who is in support of this change. I can forward it to the full body, or if there's counselors on the call now who want to see that letter, I can forward it to you as well. It's not a public hearing, so we won't be taking public comment on this issue. Councilor Bartley, as the maker of the order, would you like to jump in? And we also have Bob Parent here still, or no? Yes, Bob is here. Okay.
Yeah, I'm ready, Madam Chair. Just so just for the public that's here, yeah, this is definitely not a public hearing, but I think with our tradition is if somebody from the public is here and wants to speak, that we generally suspend rules, and so that's my hope. That if the public wants to speak, then I hope the committee would keep with the pretty well long-standing tradition that we suspend our rules and allow the public to address us. On this point, I'm going to briefly speak, and then I'm going to defer to the city engineer. I did see the city engineer's memo, and I'm not going to dispute any of it, although I'm going to touch on one point of it. But I think just to cut the chase, because it's already been kind of a lengthy meeting as it is, so I don't want to belabor this or the next one. But the issue, and I want to speak to the chair, to Mr. Parent. Bob, are you? Oh, Bob, you are here. Good to see you. Okay, just through the chair to Bob. I read the ordinance, Bob. Thanks for the clarification. On the petition to the Board of Public Works, is there a specific form or specific requirements? Because I didn't see them laid out in the ordinance, and I don't know what, because your memo references it, but I didn't see if there's a form. I doubt strongly the city clerk has one. And then requirements, is there a percentage of the property owners? Is who's required to sign the petition?
Right. I would ask perhaps the city solicitor to interpret the words are here, but the words, you're correct, say petition. It doesn't specify whether it needs to be supported by one person, multiple people. So I think it's really a request, and that request goes to the council, then gets referred to the Board of Public Works. The Board of Public Works considers it. It lays out the public way if the Board of Public Works is in agreement. The public way is supposed to be constructed, and then it comes back to the city council at that point for actual acceptance.
Okay, so the petition would go directly to city council, then be referred to the Board of Public Works. Is that your understanding? That
is mine, and again, I would ask for the city solicitor to interpret if she sees fit.
Yeah, the appropriate time, but I'm sure she's taking notes of some of the questions, so we can just, I'm sure she'll give us some feedback when they suspend rules and allow her to speak. One thing you raise in here, Bob, is the road would need to be fully reconstructed, and so what's that got to do with anything here? Because I'm just wondering, I don't see in the ordinance a requirement under 8.1, 8.2, or 8.3, because 8.4 is, I don't think, applicable. So I don't see a requirement that the road be reconstructed. Am I missing something?
I believe so. Section 78-85 indicates that no street or way constructed on private lands shall be laid out, established, or accepted as a public street, or recommended for such acceptance as a public street unless previously constructed and completed in accordance with the following specifications.
Right. So have we established that road is on private land?
My understanding, and I did a bit of research here, I traced this back to at least 1950. In 1950, there's a plan on file at the Registry of Deeds that identified at that time as the roadway being an abandoned county road. And the typical practice when rights of way become abandoned, that there is shared ownership that reverts back to the adjoining property owners. And rights to pass that remain, but it appears to have been abandoned by the county over 70 years ago.
Okay, so I think that's probably another one for legal as well, Bob. I don't, you know, I think you probably would want that. You don't want to make a legal opinion on whether or not that's a public way or a private way. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we can go there on based upon that. But I do appreciate it because I don't recall when we had a discussion on Liberty Street. I don't recall discussion of and there's Liberty Street comes right to mind, but there was another public way that we accepted recently. I don't recall discussion on
Yeah, hey David, I followed that one on Liberty Street.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a recent one. Councilor Leahy, I know that. So I don't recall any of this. I mean, I think just speaking from what I understand on the party that wants to have it done is, you know, they want to have the street plowed. I'm not sure if they're looking for any kind of a major road reconstruction project. Moreover, if this is in fact a private way, which you know, that's an open question. There's no way that's definitive at this point. But because it's public entities on both sides of that road that control, that are on probably 70% of it or more going up that hill. So to consider them to be a private owner, I think that's a major stretcher case. And I would have to, wow, I mean, we're getting to really arcane property law, but if it's a public entity that owns either side of the road, I'd be hard pressed to think how that would translate to making this a private way. So if I was gonna, which I am gonna do, I'm gonna give my 2 cents on this. I certainly want to defer to what Bob said, and I think we need to have a petition signed by Mrs. Moynihan, certainly who's at the top of the hill, and I can help her prepare that with her granddaughter's online here right now. I can see her name up there. I can help them prepare a petition, and it'll have to, you know, be my shorthand unless the law department wants to give me some advice on the format. But I can have them prepare a petition and have that filed for next week's for the city council meeting. So I think that would probably be the best thing for this. And so in my opinion, I can say that, you know, Ordinance Committee, as far as I'm concerned, complied with it. Although if Heather wants to speak, I mean, her hand's been up for a while. The Ordinance Committee probably complied with it, and then we need to, you know, go through the city ordinance to put in a petition and proceed accordingly. Thank you.
I see Councilor McGivern's hand, and then I just wanted to know, Bob, who is there? Anyone does the city plow this road currently, or who clears the road otherwise?
I believe the city does.
I'm sorry. Do you know?
I don't know for certain. Others, property owner probably knows better than anyone else.
Because in the letter that came through from one of the interested parties, they spoke about
plows it. The city plows it.
The city plows it.
Yep. City does trash pickup, recycling pickup. The city does everything.
Trash, recycling.
2 city street lights.
I was just gonna say, yeah, had lighting from the city.
All right, so those are the things that I wanted to know off the bat. Councilor McGivern, and then I think we need a suspension of the rules to allow Heather to speak.
Thank you, Councilor Lisi. If I could, just some questions to the city engineer through the chair. Bob, Owens Place, did the city pave Owens Place?
Did the city pave it? I don't know if they have paved it recently. One thing I want to note is that Mass DOT through the Chapter 90 program has become much more rigorous in terms of cross-checking for street acceptance prior to allowing Chapter 90 funds to be used for repaving projects. And I know that it has become much more stringent over the past half dozen years or so, because another community I ran into the same situation. So my answer is that the city may have repaved it at one point, but streets that are not currently an accepted city street cannot be repaved with Chapter 90 funds today.
Well, we've repaved St. Vincent Street, which was not a city street at the time it was repaved. The city did repave Owens Place, which is not a city street at the time it was repaved. Liberty Street has always been repaved over the years. It's never been a city street, correct?
I believe so, but I'm just saying what the current practice is with Mass DOT.
Well, the homes on each of these streets I just named are all paying property tax. That I know, I'm not asking. We are picking up their trash. We are doing the recycling. We have electrical, gas in some cases. We have everything in terms of city service, except we don't accept the street and we don't pave it. Or do we? We seem to pay it to St. Vincent was because of Dean's School. The city council got involved and helped a number of residents who were against allowing that street to be accepted, to make sense out of it so that property wasn't taken and the street could be repaved, because a lot of people use that street. A lot of people on Owen Street, we went through the same argument with Councilor Bacon only a few years ago. And, tonight we're looking at the same argument with two homes on a street that when the homes were built were a street that was a county road. However, that was only because it interconnected with another part of with another community. And it just seems to be we're not consistent with this. The two families here have done everything as Hoyokers, as taxpayers, and yet we're not taking the steps to do what we should be doing as a city to give them what they deserve for full service. And it's time to pave that road, fill in the potholes, and make their lives a little bit less miserable. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilor Bacon?
I just wanted to make the motion to suspend the rules to allow the public to speak on this issue.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. We have Heather here. Name and Heather. You're on mute. Sorry about that.
We can't hear you, Heather.
There
Just
it is.
seems as though filling the potholes.
You were on mute. You were on mute until just now. So for the record, we need your name and address.
Heather Fleury, 18 Davis.
Great.
So again, the city does currently plow the street all the way up. The trash is picked up all the way up the hill. Recycling is picked up all the way up the hill. To continue to fill the potholes, which are huge, seems to be a waste of money in the long run. If it was repaved with the amount of traffic that goes up and down, I think that it would be a substantial savings in the long run. Never mind, it's a safety issue. And again, my grandmother's 84, my mother's 63, and the other woman who lives up there is 60 plus years old. It's all women, and they need to be able to access that road to get up and down for safety issues. Never mind what it would do for the plows.
I'm not sure. Are you still speaking? I don't know if you're skipping out or if you're taking a
Nope.
pause.
Nope. I wasn't on pause. So what I said was, with the plows going over the potholes that are there, it's going to cause damage to your city trucks too.
And do you know if the city is the one that's filling the potholes?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, so it seems like all the sort of expenses that we would incur by making this a
Public way are already
public
there.
way are already being incurred. And to the point raised by the solicitor and Council Bartley, we're gonna likely say that this has been complied with tonight, but then initiate the process through the petition that would need to be followed in order to make any more progress on this issue.
I thank all of you.
Sorry, Crystal, do you have your hand up on this matter, or is that just a remnant?
I do, but I think it's sort of been answered. I was curious if this really was just an issue of plowing. There's laws that speak to that even if it's a private way, we can still vote to spend monies to plow a private way, but it sounds like that's already being done. So I guess I'm not sure what the actual thought is behind this in making it a public way versus a private way. It sounds like they're already getting all of the city services.
But it's not paved. Take a ride up there.
So if it's not paved, I guess that's a different issue, but it came to be, it was plowing, so that's a little different.
Right, and then finally, it's worth sort of re-asking that question to Bob, because he did say that he did quite a bit of research on this, but if we do accept it as a public way, does that require us to plow to pave the road?
No, certainly the city makes decisions all the time about what streets they can pave and what streets they can't pave, given the limited funding that's available. It's really just a question of adding more to a list that we can't currently get done right now. This street, it's a driveway. There, as I indicated in my memo, it may have been paved at one point, but there's really very little remaining pavement there. So if we were to pave it, it would take more than the ordinary type of preparation. We'd likely have to remove the existing material, at least put some gravel in there before we did pave it, or else the investment we make in new pavement wouldn't last very long.
Thank you. Councilor Murphy, I see your hand up there.
Yeah, just, and I'm not sure what the answer here. So if we don't accept it as a public way, it appears that we could still pave it based on everything else that we do there. So if in fact it is not, I would certainly, and I think one of the issues with Chapter 90, if it's not a public way, but, and I think Bob, you indicated we would get very little reimbursement by accepting this as a public way for Chapter 90 funds, that it was a very minimal amount based on the additional footage. Am I correct?
We would get very little additional funding, but if it was an accepted public street and we paved it, those funds would be Chapter 90 eligible. However, there would be funds that wouldn't get spent somewhere else in the city. So adding this street wouldn't add much to our annual appropriation, but adding this street would make any paving work we did on the street Chapter 90 eligible.
So again, I would, I certainly would have seen that the homeowners in 1950 had it
same homeowner
understanding with the county, and that it was basically they were expecting public services, which they're getting, with the exception of the road being paved. And I understand, we have difficult times and things, but obviously in this particular case, we got people, as Councilor McGivern said, paying taxes, doing all the things that they should do. And whether we accept it as a public way or not, I would strongly suggest that we try to, probably prior to winter, try to get it at least grooved a little bit, so that before winter there's at least some semblance of more safety, and then try to go forward and deal with the rest in the springtime. And sometimes we just have to pay things where we're not getting reimbursed, and we can't always say, and I'm tight in money sometimes, but I've always been told I'm a little too liberal in other cases. But sometimes you just got to pay the piper, And if we need to pay to give constituents that are paying their taxes to get them better service, then, and we can't get reimbursed, then I'm still okay with that as well. So, and I appreciate, Bob, I was impressed by the details that you came up with on that. I was like, it was like a Bible of public ways. So thank you for your efforts on that. And again, I just, you know, we've got two constituents, two houses that are in need of a better service. And if we can provide it, let's do so.
Councilor Bacon.
Thank you, Councilor LISI. If I recall, I think the maker of the order asked that we refer this also over to legal to determine the status of the road. I appreciate all the research that Bob did, but I recall that as a request.
Sure, I think that we can request that and just have it sent to the full body.
May I say one last thing?
Just 1 second. Crystal, did you get that request from Councilor Bacon?
I did, but I've already spoken to Councilor Bartley. I think we've determined it's a private way.
Oh, okay. If it's all set up, then if it's not needed, perhaps I misunderstood.
Okay, and then finally, Heather, did you want to?
Yeah,
oh, sorry,
the last thing is no one can build up there due to mass wildlife and fishery, which is what I put in the email. So my intent is to have them split the cost with the City of Holyoke if it goes to become a public way for the paving. So it wouldn't all be incurred on the city, hopefully. So I'm looking at all angles here. And again, my grandmother's 84. And if anyone knows my grandfather, Jack Moynihan, he would have gave the shirt off his back to anyone. So I really hope you guys consider it. I really thank you all for your time and allowing me to speak. I really do.
Thanks. Councilor Bartley, and then Councilor Bacon, is your hand up or is it?
All set, I think.
Okay, Councilor Bartley.
Yeah, thank you. I don't, so just through the chair to Bob and Crystal. So I don't remember us saying we established it was a private way. What we established was through Bob's research that it appeared to be an old county road, but it's abutted on both sides for 70% of it by a public entity. So I don't know how that, you know, maybe it does, but I don't know how that equates to making that a public way. So I guess I need to get an understanding on that as to how is that determined to be a private way. So I don't believe we established that, but my hope, my expectation was, you know, you were taking some notes that when Bob and I would have our colloquy, because we raised I mean, I don't remember what they all were, but you know, fortunately we're on tape and we're recorded, and so you can, you know, play that part back. But we had a few questions relative to Bob's ample research that, you know, I certainly had some questions about it. So one was whether it's a public way, whether even if we accept it, whether it's a private way. That's one question. Whether if we do the public way, his memo raised a specter of a major public, but I didn't hear anything in there where that there's a timetable. So I guess I'd want to understand that part. Then the other part, a third part, Attorney Barnes, that we referenced regarding the petition. If you recall, we had a question about the petition, and I said to the city engineer, is there a form? The city engineer opined that he did not know. I said, furthermore, is there a requirement on there for how many people are supposed to sign the petition? The city engineer said he did not know. It's not clear. And so we both said, let's get something from legal. And that's what Councilor Bacon was referring to. So no, we don't. We have several unsettled legal matters that we're hopeful that you can shed some light on. Finally, Madam Chair, in the meantime, as I indicated, I think you can send this along and get this out of the committee. I would humbly suggest you do that. I said also in the meantime that I'll work with Ms. Fleury and her grandmother, Mrs. Moynihan, and I will just come up with a, you know, a petition. I'm pretty sure we can pretty sure through the chair to Heather, I'm pretty sure we can get 100% of the residents up there since there are two. I'm pretty confident looking. So that should satisfy any minimal requirements, but still, I want to know what the requirements are because this issue is going to come up again. So is there a form? Is there a number of residents on the form? You saw on the next opinion that we in ordinance a few years ago, we came up with something for carving out private parking on public streets. So we did that in our little world. I would assume there's something else, but if not, then maybe we should develop it. So I will work with Ms. Fleury tomorrow. I'll come up with a petition. In the meantime, if we could get something just through an email from Attorney Barnes relative to those questions, that'd be great. Thank you.
And Councilor Bartley, I would also just recommend perhaps checking with the DPW board because they may have the sort of documents or governing regulations in the same way that they govern the changing of a street name. You know, they may have.
I think that's a great idea. I think that's a great idea, Madam Chair. But I will. I just think in this case, since there's only 2 residents up there. Now I realize Fish and Wildlife or whatever they are is there, but we'll get the 2 Holyoke residents and taxpayers anyhow, and Fish and Wildlife. We'll worry about them later. But I will ask that question.
I'd like to make a motion. Say it's complied with then.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor?
I'd like to amend that if I can.
Sure, go ahead, Councilor Murphy.
That it's been complied with, that we also send a recommendation to the DPW that they do whatever they can to make the street safer prior to the start of winter.
And just one last thing, I didn't hear a vote on referring it to legal too, so I don't want that to just slip away. Though I'm sure she'll do it, but I'd rather have a vote on it.
Councilor Lisi, I'll just renew my motion relative to legal.
Second.
Okay. So then the motion is that it be complied with and that we get legal counsel on the questions that were raised. Bartley, since you raised a number of questions, do you mind documenting for
I think
Crystal
I did twice. Already.
I mean,
yeah, one was a petition. One is the number of petitioners, what percentage. I think that the third was whether or not this is actually a private way, seeing how it's abutted by a public entity, Fish and Wildlife or whatever they're called. And then the Spectre raised about the $300,000 in roadway improvements as a basis for declining this. I hear that, but I don't hear how that's any kind of requirement that we, once we accept as a public way, we have to do XYZ road improvements. So I guess I'd want an opinion on that as well.
Okay, so I do want to say that it seems like again, just in terms of using council's time efficiently, these are all questions that you could sort of ask directly of our department head. And while I'm happy to make them part of our formal recommendation here,
yeah, please do.
I don't know if it gives any added weight to the work that Crystal's going to do for this issue.
I could just through the chair. I do ask for that regularly, but it just didn't happen this time. But regularly that happens.
Thank you. The other recommendation that would be going with the disposition is that we ask DPW to make improvements to the road condition before winter.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right. So on that motion then, that it's complied with, get a recommendation, and that we send a recommendation to DPW. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. That's a 4-0 vote. And then finally, moving to item number 3 in the agenda. I'll entertain a motion to take up item number 3.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to take up item number 3, and give me a second here. Here it is. Filed by Councilor LeBron Martinez that the city grants resident parking for 340 Hampden Street. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. So Councilor Gladys LeBron Martinez filed this order. As the maker, do you want to speak to the issue here?
Yes, this order has come before us in the past due to parking limitations for this particular resident, Jessica, who's on. She's on our Zoom call here tonight. This time her request, I didn't want to share, but it is considered disability if you're an expecting individual at the time, that she is having difficulty being able to find parking as she is pregnant and needing to get to her home late at night after work hours. And she's on the call right now. She was aware of what happened last time, and is hoping that we are going to consider this parking for her in front of the bar that has been granted, that they can have all the parkings, and all we are asking is for one parking in front of her home. The rest of the block is more like a L-shaped kind of building, so there is parking to the street above her that the tenants park, but for her to walk away from where she's at blocks before she can find a parking, it has been the issue for her. I'm gonna let her speak on it. If you allowed her to speak, I'm sorry.
Sure. I think what I'd like to do is just have Bob, since he was kind enough to sort of unearth the history of this request and also what would be required moving forward. So that's clear before we suspend the rules to have the interested party speak. Mr. Parent, do you mind just kind of summarizing the response that you gave us?
Certainly. The procedure written in the city's code of ordinances indicates that resident-only parking is allowed, and that the process to follow would be that a petition gets submitted to the city council, and the makeup of the petition is specified that it needs to be a petition that is signed by 2/3 of the impacted parties. And the ordinance defines what the area of impact is. It is the area which the resident-only parking would exist, and then extending 300 feet beyond that, or to the next closest fully signalized intersection, or to the end of the street. And the way that impacted area would play out on this section of Hampden Street is it would go to Beach Street in one direction, and it would extend 300 feet down Hampden in the other direction. And if a petition was filed that had 2/3 of the impacted people within that zone requesting that resident-only parking, it could then be presented to the council, and the council could then hold a public hearing. The public hearing has to be noticed. It has to be published twice, and it also has to be sent to all the impacted property owners, and then the council can then have a public hearing and move forward, rendering a decision.
Thank you. And then Councilor LeBron, did you get a copy of the opinion that Bob sent?
I saw an email today requesting, was this a person requested disability? Was there something in regards to disability? Is all I remember seeing.
Okay, so then there's an opinion. I'm just going to forward it to you so you have all of the steps that Mr. Parent outlined in his summary, so that you could help the applicant go through. There's a more formal process that needs to be followed here. But is there a motion to suspend the rules and allow the
Second.
motion has been made and seconded to allow the public to speak? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Jessica, for the record, can you please state your name and address?
Yep, it's Jessica Dia, and my address is 340 Hampden Street.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And you're welcome at this point to add anything to the conversation, or if you have questions about this more formal process with the petition, you're welcome to ask those questions.
Okay, so yeah, what Bob was explaining was kind of confusing for me because I just I live, it's just like one house and there's an alleyway and an alleyway and it's just one parking spot that I need. I am 7 months pregnant now and it's kind of hard to like you know, walk to and from my car. Especially if I'm carrying heavy things, you know, which isn't good. The on certain days of the week, it's just impossible to find parking anywhere, like even on this street. I'll have to go to a different street to go park. And it's just very frustrating for me.
So the few things that I can offer at this point is that there's no fast fixes. It's a long process either way. I mean, it may be something that I'm not sure, but there may be a way to reach out to the Commission on Disabilities. Like if we could get a temporary handicap parking spot for you through the Commission on Disabilities. Otherwise, it would be, you know, if you have a handicap placard on your vehicle, then we could do handicap parking. And then if that's not the case, then it is sort of, you know, submitting this petition to the City Council with the, you know, 2/3 of interested parties and then having a public hearing. So that's just not going to be a fast process if you're just looking to have the space for the, you know, few months remaining in your pregnancy. But if it's for something more, it may be worthwhile.
Right. I am looking for something more, obviously, because I've a few years back I've also asked for your help to get this parking spot because it's just so hard and so frustrating. Like, you know, just people parking here and I have nowhere to park, and you know, come home tired from work or whatever. Or if I have to carry heavy things like groceries or laundry or whatever, it's just really frustrating.
And then I guess, you know, do you have a handicap placard on your vehicle that would allow you to qualify for handicap parking that would be more permanent?
I don't have a handicap placard.
So, I mean, that's another avenue to explore. I mean, you have the petition option available to you if you are looking for something more long term. It is, you know, a bit more of an extensive and formal process than the handicap placard in some ways.
Right.
Councilor LeBron Martinez, you have your hand up?
Yeah, is there any way temporarily we can help her expedite a handicap and say that it's temporarily until we can move with the petition necessary, that I would help her get the whatever signatures or whatever the work needs to be put into it, that she can get this parking. I've gone by there and I've driven, and I apologize, Jessica, I should have taken pictures and realized how busy it gets where she is not having her parking available in front of her house. But she was even at one point several years ago inquiring about a lot in back of her house, which I don't know if it's been taken up, Jessica, that she was willing to work with the city if we could have gave it up, you know, for a very reasonable pricing, in a sense of for her to make up a parking space for her, because that's how bad she needs the parking.
Yeah, I'm not personally familiar with any temporary, but it's worth, I think, talking to the Commission on Disabilities to see if there is.
Okay.
And then the other thing that you're talking about with the lot and back, I think you would, Councilor LeBron Martinez, want to talk to Planning and Economic Development about that matter. Councilor Bartley?
I wouldn't have the financial resources for that, to buy that property or even a piece of that property. But I mean, I could like pay for like a little piece of parking if you need.
Yeah, I mean, It's a matter to bring before the Planning and Economic Development office. It may be city-owned. It may be, you know, something that you could buy at an auction for $1. Like it really just depends on the status of that parcel.
Oh, okay.
But
I think they're planning to build a duplex there. I think I got a letter about that.
I think I know what you're talking about now. The Council Bartley, that might be what you were going to raise in the Taub property.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. I actually came into this meeting with a much stronger perspective, but I'm going to soften it now. So I'll just say a few things to through the chair to Jessica, if I may. First of all, the Ward 1 counselor was certainly copied on the email that I got from Mr. Parent. So Gladys, there's no doubt that's in your email box. So that opinion's there. Second of all, to Jessica, if you want to copy that opinion, I don't want you to give out your email now.
Okay.
But my email is on the city's website as every other person in the box here.
Okay.
But I'm offering, so you can just email me.
Okay.
Bartley for Ward3 at Gmail, but it's on there. Email me and I'll send it to you tomorrow morning when I go back to my office. So you can have it as well as a city ordinance. So you'll have that handy dandy when you turn your computer on, you know, when you get back from work. Okay.
Okay.
But it's right there. David Bartley, Ward 3. Who cares? But any other counselors on here? All right. Two more things. One, the people, I'm very familiar with the people that own the church that abut your building. I'm very familiar with the people that own 100 Pine Street that's diagonal from your building. I would be shocked if they didn't have some kind of consideration for you. So that's something else we can explore through email. And then as far as public parking goes, you know, unfortunately, Jessica, you don't own zip cars, so you're not going to get a whole lot of consideration from the mayor or OPED and give you 2 free parking spaces on a public street. If you own zip cars, you would have those. You'd have 2 dedicated parking spaces for no cost. There's no remuneration to the city of Holyoke for them. And if you don't believe me, just go on Maple Street.
The issue that you're raising is just going to be confusing for the resident here, and I don't think it's appropriate to raise it and confuse and compound things. So
okay, but are you done? Okay,
I'm done. Are you?
Okay, so well, I appreciate you the kind words you gave me about my earlier suggestions, but that's awful sweet of you to chime in there. At 102 Beach, yeah, that is a private lot that was owned by the city, and we just conveyed that out to a gentleman that's going to develop that. So that's going to be kind of taken off the table at this point. So the only other thing you can do, I don't think there's any kind of a handicap placard that you can get, despite the fact that you're pregnant. And I wish you the best with that, obviously, but. And I wish there were, because that sounds like, to me, that sounds like a winner as far as a temporary thing. And something I certainly would support. That's something you might want to consider that would have to be through state legislation. And you'd have to talk to the state rep or the state senator once the new year happens. And I would say you might, in fact, get some traction for doing that, because it sounds like a pretty good idea, especially for somebody that, in your shoes. Now, you won't be in those shoes at that point, but maybe down the road, that's something that the legislature could consider on a temporary basis, similar to what, you know, because they're the ones that set the laws on handicap parking.
Right.
Okay, so I hope those thoughts help. Email me with any other questions, and I thank the chair so deeply.
Thank you, Dave.
Councilor McGivern.
Thank you, Councilor Lacey, and I think, unfortunately, this is an age-old problem that, and I grew up in this neighborhood that has existed for many years. The homes in the residential part of this neighborhoods that were built when people walked to work, when people walked to the market, when people walked everywhere, and there was a Holyoke bus company that took anyone that needed to go further, you know, for very, very cheap, you know, on the bus itself. And, just next, Jessica, just next to your home, there's an apartment building with 9 apartments. Down the other corner, there's an apartment building with 6 apartments. And when you just your side of the street, you're looking at close to 17 families that have no off-street parking whatsoever. It's a nightmare, and we recognize that. Across the street, at certain times there's a business that has no off-street parking that contributes to this. Fortunately, the business does close at night, but that doesn't help you when you're coming home. And there's only one home on the street that has off-street parking, and that's directly across from you. And the state will not allow us to designate on-street parking for anyone. We know that through our handicap ordinance. Even when there is a handicap placard, we cannot designate it. It's when you put a handicap parking spot up, it's for anyone who has a handicap placard itself.
But what about the other resident-only parking spots that they have in other places?
That's the petition that they're talking about. And most of those that exist don't have businesses on the same street. So I'm trying to think it out myself. I mean, I don't know how to accommodate one person when you're literally looking at 17 families that probably have a similar need. And it's just there's no easy answer.
The last thing that I'll add is I do think that the DMV allows for a temporary handicap parking placard for pregnant women. And so that's another place to check, the DMV. I'm sorry, Councilor McGivern, did you have your hand up, or were you finished? I thought you were done there. On mute. No, he's good. He's good. Yeah, I think it could probably be very simple. Instead of like going down to the DMV, just give them a call and see, in the same way that we're sort of like laying out the steps of the process here for how to get the resident only parking, or the handicap parking space. Call the DMV and see if there is a way for you to get temporary handicap parking permit, and then we could go from there with the Commission on Disabilities. And then Councilor LeBron Martinez has been your point person here, but if you need additional help, I'm happy to help also.
Okay.
Councilor Leahy does have his hand up. Councilor Leahy.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to give a shout out to Councilor LeBron Martinez. She does a fantastic job for her constituents, and for this young lady that's on our Zoom call tonight, please know that your city councilor is doing a fantastic job for you. However, as Councilor McGivern so eloquently pointed, this isn't something that is done usually. I have 3 children, and I do understand. I lived in kind of an apartment building when I had my first child, and it was very difficult. But however, this is just something that isn't done. But I do want to give props out to Councilor Martinez for helping you out there. If there's anything we can do to help you, please let us know. But as Rebecca said, give them a call, see if there's anything they can do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, there is the petition avenue for resident parking by permit, which is available to you, but it is an involved process. I think you've heard here tonight that you have several folks who are here to help you navigate that process.
Okay.
But the quickest fix may be calling over to DMV and seeing if there is a temporary handicap placard that you could get for the remainder of your pregnancy, and I'm sure in some ways it could go into the infancy of the child. I think I've seen that before. Is there a motion then to say that this item has been complied with?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded that the item is complied with. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Can I,
Go ahead,
even if we go back to a petition that once it's compliant, have to file an order again for that petition that will come forward for resident requests of parking?
The petition itself would be the new order.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, the petition itself becomes the new order. It would be submitted to the clerk. We would get the signatures verified, and then it would come to the council.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. We have no other business on our agenda tonight.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
It's been made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Moved. Thank
Good
you.
night.